students and adults learn best by doing. We learn better when we're engaged, when we see that the learning is relevant and that we're not just lectured at. The example that I can think of is around language learning. I sat in a French classroom for 5 years and I never learned French. And then I moved to Ecuador, South America, after college, and I learned Spanish in 4 months. If there's no connection to your real world, then you're not going to learn it.
Aloha and welcome to the Unrulr Podcast. I am privileged and overjoyed to get to speak with Shoshanna Sumka, Executive Director for ISEEN, an incredible network that I'll let her explain in just a little bit. Shoshanna, I wanted to start this podcast by thanking you. ISEEN has been the most important professional development I've undertaken, and it's been a space where I found my community as an ex-ed teacher, but just really as an educator in general. And I think for so many people that are trying to go against the status quo of education, it's lonely. And ISEEN became a space for me to find that community of educators that are at totally different stages of their space. So just wanted to start this call by thanking you for being here, but also for helping to foster this community.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And it's really an honor to be here. And I was excited to talk to you. And yeah, I think I love ISEEN just as much as you do. It's a space for everybody, and everybody contributes, and you bring your magic and you bring, your experience. And so we all bring that together to the ISEEN network. So
tell us what ISEEN is, what it stands for, and why you're so passionate about its work.
Yeah, ISEEN is the Independent Schools Experiential Education Network, and we're a network of about 140 schools and organizations across North America dedicated to the pedagogy and practice of experiential education, as in the title. But we're really a group of educators who, like you said, are going against the grain, who find themselves really wanting to transform education, to do things a little bit differently, and make those really meaningful experiences for their students. So we get together once a year for our annual Winter Institute, and I'll probably talk about that more a little bit, but we also have a summer institute that's for teachers and how to infuse experiential learning into the classroom setting. So those are our two sort of annual events. And then we have ongoing sort of year-round programming doing professional development. That's what we do, professional learning, networking, bringing educators together who want to meet each other and share ideas, best practices, problems, solutions, and just like really find community with each other, like you said.
I think it's that finding community with each other and having this asynchronous and synchronous community to continue to ask each other questions, very like tactical micro questions, and then macro vision questions around how do we tell the story of our work? How do we do it in, equitable ways? I think that's kind of the magic of what I've seen at ISEEN. And you're very purposeful in the language you use for this event. You call it an institute versus a summit or versus a conference. Why did you choose the word institute? I'm really interested in that.
Well, I think about the difference between, let's say, a conference and an institute. I mean, conferences are great. You think of a conference, people get together, they bring their slide decks and they do a presentation and they talk at people in a room, and then you maybe like mingle at coffee and then you maybe meet someone, you maybe don't meet someone, but it's just a very sort of one-sided information sharing. And the institute, and there's a lot of institutes out there, so I think you would find this commonality among institutes is that there's very intentional learning outcomes. And there's very intentional community building, and there's very intentional sort of beginning, middle, and end of the experience. And so as experiential educators, we model the Institute after like a student experiential learning experience. And so, we have a theme. So this year's theme is around finding our roots in experiential education and student flourishing, finding our places to flourish. So you'll find that the theme is represented throughout. So we're really intentional around making sure all of the activities are focused on that theme. And then we have the learning outcomes. By the end of this institute, we'll learn about how we infuse teaching and learning throughout our schools, how we sort of inspire students to work for social change and justice. And we'll talk about cultural competency and how cultural competency is part of our experiential learning pedagogy and practice. So those are some of the things that make it intentional, like not a conference. And the community building piece, when you're at an event with 160 other people, you might not necessarily meet everyone. And our goal is to have these smaller group building connection touch points where we practice the best practices of experiential education. And homerooms is one of our sort of
I love it.
landmark programs where you're in a homeroom group throughout the 4 days of the Institute to practice reflection, to practice reflection and debriefing and community building. And these are all the things that, we talk about doing with students, but as educators in the Institute, we get to experience them ourselves and get to be students for 4 days. So you're sort of like have the student hat on, and then you sort of take the student hat off, and you're like, okay, how would we debrief this with students, and how would you do that? And then you get to be a student and experience it, and you sort of go in and out of that being a student experience, and then the educator hat. And yeah, I think it can be magical.
I mean, it totally is. There's like a before ISEEN Institute for me, Winter Institute, and an after. And I was fortunate, and it totally sounds hyperbolic, but it is 100% true. 2022, Sedona, Arizona, incredible location. And I'd been seeking this community of educators that are not just in theory, but are in practice and praxis.
Yeah.
And what was remarkable about 2022 is that you had teachers, program leaders, administrators, policymakers at very different stages of their, whatever we call it, XED, deeper learning, like whatever buzzword we're using in the moment, right? But just really student-centered and kind of agency-driven experiences. And so you could teach, right? And feel that power, that kuleana, like responsibility. You could learn from others. But most importantly, you joined this group of people that, for me, some of my best friendships in education came from. And so I think that's what's remarkable about the Institute and the space. There's a great, I talk about him in every podcast I do, but Kwaku Anning is a teacher in San Diego and program leader. And he talks about there needs to be space and time for reflection and culture to be built out.
Absolutely.
And when you're in an institute or conference, you're going, but you all have somehow found the secret sauce of giving that space for us to form connections and have reviews and retrospectives. Can you give, these listeners some tips and tricks on how you did that?
Well, it's about building, it's the structure, but it's also the relationship. So I mentioned some of the structure pieces. So the homeroom, it's building a schedule that leaves, that's full. It's a very full schedule, but it also
definitely is.
Yeah, but it also leaves some space for reflection. And I think it's about not being afraid to be a little bit silly and to be a little bit vulnerable. And, in such a short time, you wouldn't naturally meet your best friends in 4 days, right? But we because of the schedule, we condense it and we, do intentional community building activities. We do, we do deeper questions and ask people to really dig deep and share and like I said, be vulnerable so that you can build connections, see what do you have in common, what do you want to learn from someone, and I think if people want to create those spaces, then they need to be like open and vulnerable, and we set group norms, right?
Yep.
How do we behave together that like you would do with a student group?
You model it all. It's all interconnected, right? And you do it in a way that reinforces everything.
Yeah.
And when I was in undergrad, I read about Patrick Van Rensburg, who created the brigade school system in Botswana, where students built the school, students were involved in the community. They learned all these amazing technical skills. They built like kind of community marketplace. And his whole theory was around sense of place, right? Like getting youth enmeshed in their community and having other stakeholders in their lives be a part of their learning. And what's remarkable about the ISEEN Institute, and I can only speak to Winter, is that you do that by having a partner school host an event. And in Sedona, this amazing boarding school enmeshed us into not just the school, but the community stakeholders and partners, showed us how they do that, right? Again, the micro of risk management, the macro of implementing a vision. And then last year in Cary Academy, Danielle, Michael, this incredible team.
Yeah, in North
Palmer,
Carolina.
In North Carolina, in the Research Triangle, right? Like totally enmeshed I went to Duke School, incredible K-8. And in this X-Ed day, right, we got to understand the role of sense of place in experiential learning. Again, there's magic to that, right? You've created agency in your community to celebrate what they're doing, right? Just like we want to create agency in our students to celebrate what they're doing too.
I love how you put that, Aaron. And I think you'll find in the Bay Area in San Francisco for this Winter Institute, I think you'll find, that same but different, right? It's place-based. So it's going to be based in the Bay Area, in Oakland, and the school that we're partnering with is the Athenian School in Danville, California.
Such a cool school.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we loved our site visit there. And every school that ISEEN partners with is different. So Athenian's going to be able to showcase their programs and their partnerships and how they work with community partners, how they work with the land, and building a sense of place and sense of community. And we didn't even talk about that. You said something about the X-Ed and Action Day. So that's one full day of the Institute, which is that's short for Experiential Education and Action. These are full day workshops. When you go to a conference and you don't leave the conference room and you have no idea, you could have been in any
100%.
Anywhere.
100%.
Well, we spend the entire day doing place-based learning led by students and faculty and staff at the host school.
And that's the biggest part right there.
That's it, right? So that's where you get to experience, they're showcasing programs that they do, partnerships that they have, and there's 13 different opportunities to choose from. So you get to do one of 13. I know sometimes people are like, I can't choose. It's so hard. How do I choose between like the legacy of the Black Panther Party or, power of your plate, food justice in the Bay Area? So they're, full day experiences. And that's where you really get to be a student and feel that student agency. What are students learning? What are some ways that you could do this at your school or your organization? And then there's reflection built in to that day. So there's reflection built in with your experiential education and action group. So there's probably like a group size of about 10 or 15 people. And then you come back and everyone who's been in different experiences are in mixed homeroom groups. And so then you get to hear what other people did during the reflection at homeroom, and everyone gets to learn from each other based on whatever different experiences they had that day. So yeah, that's my favorite part. It's and it's fun. Learning should be fun. Learning's joyful.
Totally.
That's what sticks. That's what students remember.
No, I love that. I mean, and do you also have these micro presentations? I don't know if you'll do them again this year. I got to do one with Kelly Fast, who at the time was at Notre Dame de Sion and is now at Cascades, just around like documentation and learning. And it was awesome. Quick, this kind of rotating room of people. And again, it felt alive. It didn't feel like the standard staring at a giant screen and not having back and forth. Can you give kind of the listeners dates, how they sign up for the Winter Institute? And we'll throw it in the show notes, but just like, kind of where it is and what you're excited about.
Yeah. So dates. So I have my sticker. So we make little stickers. Everybody gets a sticker.
Love it.
So I pulled it up to look at the dates. Winter Institute 2024 is January 23rd to the 26th at the Athenian School in Danville, California. We will all be staying at a hotel in Dublin, California. So we get a room block, and it's really great because everybody stays at the hotel together. And then we have a bus that with, free transportation back and forth between the school and the hotel. And we do most of our meals together and activities together. So we'll be back and forth, and you sign up on iseeninfo.com. That's our website. And there's Winter Institute 2024 page. And one thing, just to point out, is the audience for the Winter Institute. So it's educators, and it's really about school leaders. Who are the folks at your school who are leading school change and building experiential learning programs, both from like the inside out, like in the classroom, and then also outside the classroom, global education, travel programs, or service learning and community engagement, outdoor ed, sustainability, environmental justice, all of these strands that we consider as experiential education come together to share ideas and best practices. So that's the sort of school administrators, directors, and then teaching faculty who also run programs.
I think it's that mix of different roles and people at different
hats. Like you're wearing
totally.
a hat.
You see I'm wearing a hat.
Different hats.
Yes, which I wear quite often. Yeah, it's that mix that makes it so powerful, right? And I mentioned before that we're on different stages of our journey, right? Like Kelly talks a lot about documentation, kind of more joyous assessment, evidence of learning, connected to a school's portraits of a graduate.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Other educators might talk about how to plan a trip that's rooted in equity for its learners.
Right.
Others might, and all of these things converging, and sometimes they hit us at just the right moment, or, 4 months later, we recall that and we have that connection. What you've done is you've created, a community. What you've done is you've created stakeholders in each other's lives. So a huge kudos and congratulations to that.
Thank you. Yeah. And I love the diversity about it. Totally. Around the Institute, right? So it's people who come from different strands, and come from all over the country, all over North America, Canadian schools, US schools. People come in from all over and converge at the ISEEN Winter Institute. And people come year after year. You're coming back now, what, your third year in a row?
Three straight.
Yeah.
I'll come back as long as you let me. I mean, so I wear multiple hats. I wear the Unrulr hat in terms of documentation, but I also wear the Nalukai hat, this youth entrepreneurship program that we run over the summer. And I'm constantly thinking about that space. There was a moment last year where Dr. Bettina Love was the keynote, and she talked about total fire. And she talked about Who cares if we graduate students with 4.7 GPAs? Who cares if they go to Harvard and Stanford if we traumatize them in their educational experience? And she said she created this clarion call to action for all the people in the room to make learning rooted in the identities of our learners, to allow them to experience and build and have agency. And I think that totally represents ISEEN. So thank you, one, for having her. Thanks, Danielle, for being a part of that, I'm sure.
Yeah, Dr. Love. A phenomenal human being.
Yeah, and I think that, to me, is ISEEN. Closing out the conversation, what is your philosophy of education?
Well, Aaron, I don't think you'll be surprised to know that my philosophy of education is that students and adults learn best by doing. Yep. That's just, it's the fundamental root of my being, is that I know and I believe that we learn better when we're engaged, when we see that the learning is relevant, that our whole being, that our whole identity is engaged, and that we're not just lectured at, over and over and over again. The example that I can think of that's like super, super basic, and I think everyone will get this, is around language learning, right? Like, I sat in a French classroom for 5 years and I never learned French. It's just like lectured at. And I do want to say, let me just say that there is a place for lecture and for expert knowledge, and there's a place for that.
Totally.
But if there's
a power in content.
But if there's no connection to your real world, if there's no connection,
100%.
If there's no ability for the student, like the student agency, to practice it, to make mistakes, to do it, and figure out like how they would apply it to their, to their life, then you're not going to learn it. Like, I'd never learned French. And then I moved to Ecuador, South America, after college, and I learned Spanish in 4 months because I was fully immersed and I had to. And, it was kind of like survival. If I didn't learn Spanish, I wasn't going to be able to have a meaningful life there. So I think learning, all learning is like that. That we do it, that we learn through experience and reflecting on the experience. And
that really resonates with me. I work for an organization that's on Oahu, that's rooted in Hawaiian culture. And there's a phrase in Hawaiian, makahana ka ike, by doing one learns. Yeah. And it's just the core part.
This is not new. This is nothing new.
No, it's not innovation. It's what it was always there for.
Yeah, this is like indigenous ways of learning, indigenous ways of knowing. This has been around for a very long time. It's just that some of us are finally reincorporating that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Where can people find you? How can they amplify your work? How can they get involved with ISEEN?
I love that. Call me, email me. I love talking to people. Human connection, like that's what brings me joy in this work. But I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the most professional way to find me on LinkedIn. And my ISEEN email, Shoshanna@iseeninfo.com. And
thank you so much for your time. And again, thank you for helping me to find my community and helping me to find my people. Thanks, Shoshanna.
Thank you for being part of it.
Please share this out with your learning community. A huge mahalo for being here.